animators, and artists. To celebrate Toon Boom Animation's 30th anniversary, we're hosting virtual studio tours with studios that make exceptional use of Harmony and Storyboard Pro. Joining us today for today's studio tour are Tori Coulthart, Mike Barth, and Sam Leggatt from Jamfilled Entertainment. Jamfilled Entertainment is an animation studio founded in 2007 by Kyle MacDougall, Phil Lafrance, and Jamie Leclaire as, in their words, a studio that they would want to work at. Today, the studio is present in Ottawa, Toronto, and Halifax, and has contributed animation services to shows such as DC Superhero Girls, We Lost Our Human, Clone High, and The Loud House. So, Tori, Mike, and Sam, welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, just to start some introductions, how would you describe your journey to your current role at Jamfilled Entertainment? And we'll start with you, Mike.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Mike. I'm a 2D creative director of 2D animation and R&D at Jamfilled. My journey to where I am, well, I'm a Sheridan grad back in 2005, back when it was still just the classical program, the 3-year draw-on-paper course. There was no digital anything at that point. But it was right at that cusp where things were changing, right? So I remember the studios coming to our industry day or like the week before or something and showing us what they were working on, and it was all being done digital in Flash, right? Adobe Flash. Back when I think that was really one of the only digital animation softwares out there at the time anyway. But it was pretty crazy that you could just move something and it's already cleaned up and colored and all this. It was blowing our minds. So I came from Sheridan and moved straight to Ottawa, which is where I am now at the Jamfield's location. But I left school and came to Pip Animation, which was a great digital house, wonderful people over there. And they were doing Flash animation work for a long time. And I sort of, I guess I was young enough, I wasn't jaded enough or stuck on the pencil paper mentality too much that I was able to adapt really quickly to using digital animation and working through Flash. And I think that helped me rise to the occasions that was thrown in front of me, the productions they were working on, which was Carl Squared at the time. And yeah, so I was able to work my way up from animator to animation supervisor, animation director. And then I had, one of my best experiences was directing with Pip Animation, Pirate's Passage, which was Donald Sutherland's, the late Donald Sutherland's, only 2D script. So I got to co-direct that. And that was an amazing experience. But after that, I was really hungry for something more, trying to see where the industry was being pushed and who was pushing it. And Jamfilled was becoming a pretty well-known name at the time in a big studio, and they were using Harmony. And I thought, hey, I kind of know Flash well, and I want to learn something new. So I sort of made the jump over there, and at the time it was a big move for myself coming from directing something, but I was happy to take a step back and just become an animator again, and really learn from everybody who was doing things new and differently at Jamfilled, and learn some new techniques and things that mattered to them that I had never considered before. And yeah, so it's been 9 years now that I've been at Jamfilled, and sort of the same journey again, animator and kind of working my way up. And now I have the privilege of working on almost every production we do as a creative director, and helping things run smoothly and making sure our quality is where it should be and where we like it to be across every production that we do in 2D.
So something that viewers outside of Ottawa might not realize is that Ottawa is a really major production hub. There are a lot of really great animation studios in the city and a lot of animation talent. Mike, when you moved to Jamfilled, were there like familiar faces? Were there other people that you've worked with previously who were also hired by the studio?
Yeah, there was a couple people I knew, but for the most part, it was a full new experience. Like because I had worked at Pip so long, I mean, the animation industry is a very turbulent thing. It's always ups and downs, and people are starting and ending contracts all the time. It's just part of how it is. Pip at the time was a very consistent place to be, and so I was very fortunate enough to just work there for 10 years, pretty much straight, without ever really needing to look outside my bubble. And that was part of the draw, is once I looked outside of the bubble, I was like, oh, wow, things are being done differently. Like Harmony, wow, deformers, that's cool. I've never seen those before. And these are all super attractive things. So I was happy to find new people, find new inspiration, and meet all of the people that were at Jamfield, and had already been there for a few years as they were building up. But no, I didn't know anybody. Connections are hugely important. We all know that, but so is sometimes just jumping in with 2 feet and taking a risk.
Sam, same question. How would you describe your journey to your current role at Jamfield Entertainment?
Okay. Oh boy. I went to Algonquin College here in Ottawa. So, kind of got a feel of the different studios that were around while I was in school. They would come and talk to us and all that jazz. And a real big boom in the industry happened when I was in my second year-ish. So that summer, a lot of studios were hiring a lot, which was uncommon. I don't think they were really looking at second-year students before that at all. So I didn't get in at that time, but then I was hired for builds at Big Jump, another studio in town. And again, in my school, Toon Boom was like this one side class that everyone like kind of got to touch a little, but didn't spend as much time as we probably should at the time in it, because nobody knew that was like what was going to get us jobs, right? And so, yeah, I went into the industry with like very little knowledge of what I was actually doing, but I learned on the job pretty quick. And then when Builds was done, I switched into animation over at Big Jump. And then I heard that Jamfield was actually looking at, I'm not sure if they were looking at students. I feel like their bar was always so high, right? And it was maybe graduates. So I ended up dropping out of school as like a loophole to not be a student, but get hired. And I did. I then, kind of worked up kind of like Mike, just animated, did fixing, supervising, and now I'm directing. So I've been here for 9 years. And pretty much, my whole like life in the industry has been here basically. So
So your hot tip to animation students who are watching this live stream is to drop out.
Yes. No. You know what though? At the time I asked my director at Big Jump and I asked the directors at Jamfield what I should do, because I had 1 year left. It was like life drawing courses basically. And everyone was like, you're going to learn more on the job. You're going to learn more on the job. So I'm not saying drop out, but I feel like I did learn an immense amount being here and working in the software that ultimately I was going to live in and use for the next 9 years, which I would not have been doing in school. So if your school is teaching you what you need, then of course stay in and soak it all up. But I wasn't really going to get that anyway. So I have no regrets.
All right. And Tori, how do you describe your origin story, your journey from your current role at your journey to your current role at Jamfield Entertainment?
So I also went to Algonquin, which is a school in Ottawa, and that's where I grew up. And I went into the animation program, and I entered the industry as an animation artist. And I worked for many of the local studios here, as well as studios in Halifax and Toronto in different art roles. I kind of moved between, I think I did a little bit of background paint, a little bit of animation. Animation was never felt like the right fit for me. I was always leaning a bit more on the design side, the color side. But ultimately, I love the industry so much. I love all the people in the industry, but I did have this feeling like I still wasn't in the right role. And I had this feeling like I should try to make a move into production. And at the time, I was working in Toronto for a studio called Guru Animation Studio. I was doing design on a show there, but at nights, I was taking courses at Ryerson, and I really was keen to figure out how to get into production. So I spoke to the producer there once I, had a course under my belt, and they were really, really helpful in offering me a transition job. I think I offered to, I'll clean up file folders on the side, I'll organize anything I can, and they really helped me make that leap. And it was definitely the right fit for me. I instantly felt like I was at home in that role, and it was what I was great at doing, what I was really meant for me. So through that experience at Guru, I moved up the ranks similar to Mike and Sam, but just in a different path in production. And, I started to just figure out I wanted to move back to Ottawa. And that's when I started hearing about Jamfield, which, I know when you started, you mentioned that They wanted to build a studio that people would want to work for, and that couldn't be more true for me. I couldn't wait to work at this studio. I wanted in so badly. I knew of Jamie, Phil, and Kyle from my various roles in the industry before that. I loved being around them. They're so fun, and I knew they would take care of people, and they cared about people. So I reached out to Kyle, and eventually the timing was right a few months later, and I joined Jamfield in 2016. So I think it's been 8 years. Yeah. So yeah, I've been here ever since, and it's been a wonderful experience working at Jamfield. When I started, they had just moved into Toronto, and then we've since opened a studio in Halifax as well. So we've been able to grow as well.
As someone living in Halifax, it's really exciting. You mentioned early on that you were sort of like looking for like the right role that fit you, and I think one of the challenges with like a lot of early career artists is that like when you're in animation school, you're kind of pushed towards the role of animator. But there are so many different roles in animation that maybe students or people outside the industry aren't fully aware of. From your point of view, like what should early career artists do to sort of get a feel for like the work that they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective now, looking back, it does make sense that a lot of people would lean towards animation, or the school would prioritize that, because on a crew of people, the majority of them, maybe you need 30 animators and 4 builders or something like that. So the percentage is higher in animation. That being said, my advice would be, it really is important, those early years in college or university, even if you weren't in animation, it's all about experimenting to find out exactly what feels right to you and what you feel you can succeed at and what you're passionate about, because it's not always going to be, every day is not always going to be amazing. At the end of the day, you want to love what you're doing, and you want something that'll keep you moving forward. So just experiment, play around with every single department. We have accounting roles in the studio, of course. We have, there's just so many roles that aren't even, of course, taught in animation school. But I would advise, and usually you go to animation school not because you want to be an accountant, but I would advise everybody to really experiment with every single part of the pipeline, because there's so many jobs available.
Yeah, I think with the schools, like you mentioned, they push more animation because that's like the title of the course, but we do a lot of school visits as well, and one of the things we try to make people realize is that there are so many avenues to animation, and the animation industry just encompasses so many different types of professions and mentalities. But just in like the creative alone, going to animation school is great to get a taste and an understanding of everything that is in a pipeline. But once you get into a studio, you really get a full taste of what each of those departments do and what the problems are that they're trying to overcome, right? The good problems, the problem solving that everyone enjoys. But you may have someone who really loves to draw coming out of school, but then realizes they really like the technical problem solving of a compositing artist, right? And compositing may not have been a subject where they were coming from. So just finding your way into the industry, I think is just the first step to opening up and realizing how many possibilities there are, and then you find your fit. But it's always good to have the foundations of what animation is. As Tori said, it's always the biggest department, but it's at the end of the day, it's what you're all trying to produce and deliver, right? But there's so many different roles that are involved in that, and being flexible and open-minded, I think, is good for everybody, because you may not know what it is you're going to do for the next 10 years until you try it, right?
Yeah, I feel like the schools are getting better at letting you experiment a bit more than you used to as well. I know, like when I was in college, the stream after first year, you kind of decide if you're going 2D or 3D. But now I think you can shift your focus even to like effects or layout or background. So there's even more like wiggle room to, like, if you figure it out and you just know, you can focus, or you can try that stuff, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Tori, from your point of view, what does a typical day look like at your studio? As much as there can be a typical day at any animation studio.
I'd say on a good day, for me, I am in typically a lot of meetings. I'm meeting with people that are located in all of our offices in Halifax and Toronto, as well as Ottawa. And I'd say that the great thing about meetings is the collaboration aspect. I'm typically overseeing everything from budgets and schedules to updates on the productions and shows. So I'd say for me, a typical day is a lot of meetings. It's great to have in-person meetings as well as Zoom. We're very flexible that way. But I'd say that's from my perspective. A typical day of the office isn't, most people aren't in meetings all day. They have different roles than I do. So it's, from my perspective, I'm seeing that. For others, I think a few here and there. It's always nice in the office to see impromptu, over the shoulder discussions, but that's where inspiration can come from, and everyone helping each other. So I think a couple meetings here and there, but for the most part, Mike will be focused on animation, and so will Sam, and so everyone's kind of focused on their respective departments.
Tori, is Jamfield in Ottawa primarily an in-person studio, or is it like hybrid or remote?
We're hybrid in all three cities.
Mike, from your point of view, what's a typical day look like at your studio?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a typical day. It's kind of it's a really nice mix. My title is a little weird. It's something we've sort of created and I found my way into, but it's certainly more of more production kind of oriented creative role, which is sort of really nice, because I get to care about all of the things that Tori has to think about and care about, and we talk about budgets, we talk about schedules, but I also get to get my hands dirty and actually animate and fix things and try to improve things here and there. So I get kind of a really nice foot in both worlds, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. But a typical day, yeah, it's a mix of creativity, collaboration, problem solving. It's almost a daily thing. Like, there's always something to overcome, whether that's how are we going to approach this build for its various requirements, or what is this effect going to look like in this scenario, or how are we going to improve this animation. That's the thing about animation is, and what I love about animation, and specifically with Jamfield, is nothing ever feels the same. And I mean that in a good way, because we're always trying to push ourselves. We try never to fall into formula, right? Every scene should be a challenge that you're trying to overcome. Even if it's something you think you've done before, right? Like, reuse is a wonderful tool in digital animation, but it's also something we try to strive not to use, because we don't want things to be formulaic. We want everything to have a unique flavor to it, whether that's the artists or a new way of storyboarding or problem solving the scenario. But yeah, typically I'm helping the other animation directors now. I used to be an animation director for a long time, so I love stepping back into that role. But I'll, for example, just before this call, I was helping Sam and review the production that she's running right now, and we would collaborate together in a collaborative drawing software, and just hammering out ideas and drawing sketches and trying to figure out what is the best way to make this scene feel better or overcome the problem. So typically that's, my creative role is helping drive and revise everything that kind of goes through the 2D productions. But I also get to think and do more high-level production stuff, which is also entertaining.
Mike, you mentioned that you have an unusual title at an animation studio. What do you think are some of the benefits of overseeing both creative and R&D?
The benefits? I think the goal behind one of my main goals now is unification of everything that we do, right? And I think that's a really fun goal and benefit for the studio, to have somebody that can have a foot in every production. The bigger the studio is, the more isolated the pockets become, right? And people have their own ways of doing things. Teams that have worked together for a really long time, they have their own routines and things that they do, and that information is not always accessible, right? And so having someone at a higher level that can help oversee every production allows a little bit more transparency and sharing of tools and solutions across the board. So I think that's a huge benefit. A smaller team doesn't really need to worry about that, because they're all communicating. But we have, productions that are running 8-9 years that have been pretty much that core team for a long time. And meanwhile, we've had season ones, 4 or 5 of them, while that's still running. And so you kind of, like I said, you sort of start to feel a little bit isolated unless you have that communication piece, which is kind of what I'm filling. I'm the communication between all of the creative teams now. I think that's a huge benefit, because now we're more sharing all of our resources and solutions.
And Sam, from your point of view, what does a typical day look like at Jamfilled?
Like Mike just said, I was going to make a joke about waiting for him to come boss me around, but no, I also kind of, in my role now, have my hands in like a within one production, not like Mike jumping around different shows, but I am talking to different departments and just like getting everything working together to make one unified product, you know, at the end of the day for the show. So some days maybe I am in more meetings and discussing problems that are going to be coming up ahead down the pipeline. And some days I'm buckled down on what we have a deadline for this week and actually doing the work and you know, living in the animation. So that is what I like about my job now, is my ability to kind of bounce around and be doing a lot of, my brain works best when there's a lot happening versus necessarily sitting and doing the same thing all day. So yeah, for every day for me, I don't know if there's a really answer to that, because every day is so different, and you know, you just navigate new challenges that you don't necessarily foresee. But yeah, so that's my non-answer.
I wanted to ask you each what the industry was like when you first applied to work at Jamfilled. Starting with Sam. Sam, how has the state of the industry changed since you applied to now?
Well, I kind of touched already in my little intro there that when I got into it, it was insane, like booming and hiring students and all this. So it was really crazy there for a few years as we kept building. Like, we've got our Toronto studio, we got our Halifax studio. It just felt like we kept getting shows and shows and shows, and just like meeting more and more and more people. And you know, the studio itself, when we were all here too, it grew and we had to expand in the building, and it was pretty crazy, wild time, but really fun and exciting. And not to be a downer and be like it's not now, but it's obviously quieted, and over COVID we all went home, and now we're kind of slowly trickling back, and things are starting to pick up again. So I do feel that similar kind of excitement now, after I feel like the last few years of things mellowing out. I forget where the question began. Oh, the difference. Yeah, so now I guess I'm on the hiring side as opposed to the hiree side too, so I'm looking at it from a bit of a different perspective. So yeah.
Sam, we actually got a question in the chat that's relevant to what you just said too. We had an artist ask, do you ever hire people at the studio who did not go to school for animation but maybe have a strong portfolio?
Yep.
Yeah. If your portfolio is really strong and you can do the work, I mean, it doesn't really matter what your background is.
Yeah, we might get into this later. I mean, that is one of my primary roles, is going through the hundreds and hundreds of applicants that we get for all the various roles. And it's true. It's demo reel first is what matters. As much as we love, you know, there are you know, really good schools that you could go to. At the end of the day, it's what can you show? How do you showcase your abilities? And what is the advantage for us bringing you into the team, right? So the demo reel is always what trumps. And I'll be honest, I rarely look at a resume unless there's a really hard toss-up between people, because it is almost 100% visually based. And within the first like 10 to 20 seconds, like, I already know if it's something I'm gonna like or if it's not gonna work.
So what you're saying is, if someone's making a reel, that first 10, 20 seconds really matters.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Don't put your best work at like the 30-second mark.
Do not. Nope.
Tori, what was the industry like when you first applied to work at Jamfilled?
So I think I first applied in around 2016, 2015. But when I first heard of Jamfilled, it was 2007, right around the time they opened. And I really remember that. I was really curious, and I went for a visit at their, I don't even know if they remember this, but I went for a visit at their Manotick studio, which was like a little attic in Manotick, just Jamie, Phil, and Kyle in a tiny room, like the same, you know, sitting right beside each other. And the industry at that point was, you know, we know it's not, we're at a low point right now in the industry. It felt around the same back then, because I think this was...
It might have been worse.
It might have been worse. Honestly, it might have been worse. And, you know, when people graduated from school in those years, there was no work available, and you would never... the students weren't the first to get the jobs. So this industry was going through a growing phase there, or I don't know, growing pains, maybe that's the right word. And of course, it picked up in a major way. When I joined when I was applying in 2015, it was actually at a very stable point. So I think it then continued to grow and got higher at 20. The industry was absolutely booming. They couldn't make any more animated shows. But yeah, it was quite a stable point. And I remember thinking, wow, it's amazing that people who have graduated or, a few years, like maybe 2009, they never experienced any of the low periods that in the decades prior, there was a lot more up and down. So we're always striving for that, a more of a stable industry and hoping we're getting back to that place. But yeah, it's gone up and down since.
And Mike, how has industry changed since you first applied to work with Jamfield?
At Jamfield, so not back when I started Jamfield.
Or you could go even further back to like when you started at PIP.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess I already kind of did that origin story, so I won't do too much more there. But like Tori was saying, and you just alluded to, it might have been worse. You're right, it was. I mean, there was no regulations anywhere or rules or any HR in the animation industry. It wasn't even a thing, right? We were all unit rate paid. You got paid for what you did, whether the show was easy or hard. Some people it was hard to make $300 a week, and that's all you would get because it was unit rate. There was no minimum wage, and at that time, just to paint a horrible picture, but some studios just would abandon paying their employees altogether. Like people would just go months with no pay, with the promise they will eventually get paid, and then the studio filed bankruptcy, and then that was it. They never got paid for the work, and that I know people that still have not been paid for the work they did at that time. And probably never will be. But so a very different thing. It was just a kind of a cutthroat industry, guerrilla warfare. Nobody was really helping anybody. It was just get the job done, pay as little as possible. So there's a lot of things that came, I think, from starting Jamfield 9 years ago. It was really only just starting. That stuff, all of the good stuff was really just starting, like HR and really supporting the artists and studios having benefits, and all of this stuff has now thankfully become the norm. And I think Jamfield was a big part of leading that charge as well. But I think that's like the biggest noticeable change. And from a ground level sort of artist, you could look at it as like, oh, the big company, the big brother, and all of their policies. But there is a lot of good that came from that, a lot of security, a lot of protection for employees that we never experienced before. And I think unless you've come from that really different world of like 15, 20 years ago, it's hard to fully appreciate. But it is all really good change. I think that's, other than obviously the quality of animation and the tools we use, which we also probably know about, I think that just quality of life. I know it's a hard time right now, so it's a hard argument to make, but the quality of life support that you now see at most studios is probably the biggest positive change that I've seen.
Yeah. One thing that I think is really important for artists who are applying at studios is to be familiar with the work that the studio produces. Like, you don't want to go to a studio that like just does preschool stuff with like an anime action reel, because that would probably not demonstrate that you can do the job that you're applying for or interested in. So Mike, how would you describe the sorts of productions that Jamfield takes on?
We take on, we're willing to take on anything. I think like we described before, our portfolio is really versatile, a wide range of different types of productions. We are a service studio, but we also like to develop our own IPs. We like to do demos for other creators that we've built really strong relationships with. So we'll really do anything. And I think our drive forwards is becoming more mature, more maybe action drama type based work, which we've proven ourselves with different productions like Inside Job, Final Space, various things that we're working on right now, and I think we'd like to continue that path forwards. But we're a service studio, and we value our relationships with all of our clients. So there's, as I said, like Loud House is coming into season 8 and 9, right? Like it's a kid's show, but we love working on it, and everything that we do is just another tool in our toolbox, right? Like we never see something as like, oh, it's just a kid's show. Like it's just a kid's show. That just Like, all of our leadership knows, like, it's not a word you should throw around. Nothing is just good enough, right? Like, everything
Any production you're working on is like some kid's favorite show.
100%. But you know, it's like I alluded to before. Everything that you come across is a challenge. Like, yes, okay, the character doesn't, you know, looks different, might look preschool, but you can still animate that extremely well, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You have an opportunity to flex your creative muscles and animate something regardless of what that character is. Yes, okay, it might not be something you'd go home and watch, but that doesn't matter to us, right? You're 100% right. It is some kids' favorite show, and you know what? It's the creator's favorite show. It's the thing that they love, and we really take that to heart. Like, so, you know, client relationships, I think, are a big part of the productions we take on, because we form those relationships because of the work we do and the love we put into things, and then they love coming back to us with work when they're creating their next project, and that's super valuable.
Yeah. Well, looking at a couple of the productions that you mentioned, the Loud House and the spin-off, the Casa Grandes, are both very like stylized shows that sort of relate back to like classic newspaper cartoon strips. And I think that you wouldn't want to go to just any studio to do that.
No.
Correct.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, Sam, this is Sam's world, but you know, yeah, go ahead, Sam. You take it.
I was just agreeing.
Yeah.
I like to think that, you know, a lot of heart was put into Loud House from season 1, and our other 2D head of 2D animation there, Mark Woodcox, he put in a lot of like style choices. Like, I think he helped them a lot with what it was going to look like and what it was going to feel like. So staying true to that 9 seasons in, you know, is challenging with different people coming on board and off, and constantly having to kind of revisit what that is. But it is really fun to work on something that is so specific. I think it's challenging for a lot of people, but the cartooniness of it is what I adore about it. Like, I love the like musicality and rhythm and everything that we've turned it into. And I see a lot of the stuff that you can learn on that show be applicable on other shows and stuff. So I think it's a great learning tool, and I just love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really amazing that there are animation studios that can work on a production for 9 seasons, bring on tons of new talent, and have the production look cohesive. And like, the Loud House always looks like the Loud House. You know, it doesn't look like a different show. What sort of like work goes into sort of troubleshooting and making sure that like the production stays consistent?
Who's like me? Is it me?
Yeah.
Man, okay, that's it. It is challenging. I feel like it sounds, maybe it doesn't sound easier, but maybe it sounds easier that you're like, oh, we have 8 seasons of reference to look at. Like, we have all this to work off of, but it is having to relearn it occasionally. You know, it is having to slap hands and be like, tighter, make it look like this. So it's constant training and being on top of your team and picking the right things to show them, not just willy-nilly look at season 4 of the Loud House. No, pick and choose what you want to take from that, because as much as I love that you think it's all coherent, you know, you can pick bad examples. So yeah, I don't know, Mike.
Well, anything has an evolution, and for a show that has been running for that long, I mean, you probably predict it, it's not the same team, right? It's gone through changes, new animators, new direction, new leadership. And so, yeah, the challenge is, how do you keep that cohesive look? And, you know, you could probably see the evolution if you looked at a season 1 to the final season, and that's okay, because that's dictated by the leadership and the client and the expectations. But, you know, consistent style and cohesiveness in an episode is a daily challenge, right? And I think what helps set Jamfield apart and keeps our bar high is sort of our approach to that, which is just having on hand for every production just a really talented senior team, right? Like, you can call it whatever you want, but there's a level of polish that we put on every scene, regardless if it's just straight from the animator or it's gone through revisions. But there's a level of polish that helps bring everything up to the same bar, so that an episode, when you watch it, whether it's the client or any viewer, anybody who's done animation direction before for any team of more than like 5 people, like, you can see the difference. You can see when one person starts and stops. You can see it, right? And I do believe that almost all of our products don't have that, and it's because of that extra polished layer on top. An episode feels like an episode that has been consistently created and artistically directed and handed to the client as one nice cohesive package, and never like little segmented sequences, right? So it's like that. It's like what we do on every episode, but you just try and do that across seasons, which Loud House has had so many compared to most productions. But there's inevitably going to be an evolution, but it's our job to try and make everything feel the same.
And Tori, how would you describe the productions that Jamfeld takes on?
I think if you look at our entire, resume of work, there's not one look to all of our shows. And I think that's a really unique thing in this industry, and a really great thing that we always strive for. We have a lot of versatility in our work, both on the CG side and the 2D side. And so I think that we look for projects. We usually have in our search, we usually really connect with the creators, and Jamfeld was founded by creators, and that really has left a strong imprint in our entire company and our senior group, that we really care about the product, and we really try to put ourselves in the creators' shoes to understand the pressure they might be feeling, and the anxious, if they're anxious or it's their baby, they just created the show. So we really take that seriously, and we usually find that we connect really strongly at the beginning. And so it kind of doesn't matter the genre or the look of the show. It's all about what we can bring to the table to put the creative vision at ease, to meet the creative vision, exceed it in every case, in every chance we get, and to also deliver on time and on budget and schedule. So we put a lot of care in the upfront discussions, no matter what the show. And I think as a studio, we're always looking for things and excited by things that might be a challenge for us as well. And maybe it's a style we haven't quite done yet, or we're figuring out, or we've got a little team that's put together an incredible reel or a test, and we're pushing that. So we're always looking to grow, and
Yeah. One thing I've noticed is like Jamfeld has taken on productions that expand animation to new audiences, like the Casa Grandes and DC Superhero Girls, as well as animation, adult animation like Inside Job and Praise Petey, and then like interactive programming like We Lost Our Human. Tori, from your point of view, what productions at Jamfeld were the most interesting or challenging to work on so far?
Okay, so from my perspective, of course, budget and schedule are always top of mind. I would say the ones that are, sometimes they start 3 months late because, there was something wrong, for whatever reason. It's like, we hadn't found the studio yet. And when you're racing, when you start with a schedule, and everyone's very transparent about it, but when it's a race against time, those are always the most challenging. And we've always pulled through and managed, but of course it just adds an intense level of stress on everybody. So I'd say that's from my perspective, and I'm sure Mike and Sam will have a different answer.
I'm so excited to hear everyone's answers.
Mike, from your point of view, what productions at Jamfeld were the most interesting or challenging to work on so far?
Yeah, they all are. They all have their challenges. I think the biggest one that stands out, I think, was Final Space Season 1. It was kind of the first step into something more adult, a bigger arcing serialized story. But also we were able to put in, as I said before, like every production we do is a new tool in our toolbox. And if we knew comedy, we knew Snappy, we had the Loud House formula, we had the Pinky Malinky formula, we did Bagel and Becky, we could do soft. And now here we were presented with something that it kind of needed all of that, right? There were things that needed to slow down to sell heart and drama, but there was still comedy that required snappy, and there was still a lot of really technical, big technical challenges just because of the nature of the story and the animation required, right? So specifically, it was our first real step into 2D mixed with 3D. Right, like a lot of the ships in that production were 3D assets, right? And you know, we were probably doing that extremely clunky for the time, but we were figuring it out, right? We had 3D assets with 2D characters either standing on the bridge with transparent windows so you could see them, or standing out the back of the hangar of the Galaxy One, which is actually behind me right there. There's a blueprint of the Galaxy One there. And that was huge. It was a huge undertaking. Like, do we bring the 2D characters to 3D and then finish it there, or do we do the 3D ships and bring it into Harmony? And it was a lot of back and forth, and all of those solutions were done at some point. So that was really challenging, but also extremely interesting. And as the seasons went on, that became much more efficient with a bigger 3D team supporting it and everything. But yeah, that was probably the most interesting challenge still to date, just because of the uniqueness of the what was presented to us.
Yeah, I feel like Final Space was almost the prototype of like the adult animation action comedy, because it seems like it was sort of the first sort of show that was in that mold that you now kind of see everywhere.
Right. Yeah, I think especially from a Canadian studio, right? Like there was a lot of stuff happening overseas that we certainly used as inspiration, but yeah, I agree. I mean, that's a nice thought. At the time I was just stressed about how to get it done, but it's nice to know it was sort of paving the way.
I don't think there would have been like a Star Trek Lower Decks without a Final Space.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Sam, from your point of view, which productions at Jamfield were the most interesting or challenging to work on?
Also, everyone. No, I don't know. I'm looking at it differently now, I guess. From an animation standpoint, I never got the opportunity to work on Final Space, and I could see that's an obvious answer now that Mike's given it. I'm like, oh yeah, obviously it was Final Space. I don't know. I think everyone. I think some of the main challenges that stick out in my mind, just from like my personal journey and before I was directing and animating, I think switching from Bagel and Becky, which was snappy and cartoony, but to the Loud House, which was much more ones and specific and just different. I think that's a learning curve that I see a lot of people struggle with, even now, still moving to Loud House, is keeping things snappy. So, it's a style that can look so easy when you're just watching it, but it is so particular and everything is like so thought out. So I do think Loud House is challenging in that regard. I think for myself personally, DC Superhero Girls was I learned the most on that show for my journey. I think it was a lot more cinematic and there was a lot more anatomy to take into account. Even though they were these graphic cartoon characters, you still had a lot more like 3D shapes to think about, I think. So that one was really challenging, but really rewarding, and probably my favorite thing that I've worked on. And then we have another show right now that we can't talk about, but it is really challenging too for multiple reasons as well. So they all are, they all are.
Well, Mike, you mentioned We Lost Our Human as well, which I think is worth talking about just because of the uniqueness of that production. I mean, I didn't see the production schedule, but the uniqueness of directing and animating something like that. It's a choose your own adventure Netflix special, right? Like, for those who don't know, and every so often you're presented a choice and you choose one of two options, I think mostly. But as the story progresses, you can see how that would exponentially branch into, I think,
continuity nightmare, the tracking.
They only be animated,
right? Because your hookup from one scene could potentially hook up to 9 scenes, right? And then it branches out and sometimes back in and out and sometimes back in. I wish I knew the number because I'm going to sound like an idiot if I'm wrong, but I think there was something crazy. Brad over there. It was something like 140,000 possible storylines or something crazy like that. And you can just imagine anyone who's tried to do their own short or been in an animation production. It's hard enough just doing a linear timeline of scenes, like let alone something that branches that many times. So that was, I think that's a one of a kind. I don't even know.
Yeah, that's true.
Again, as an animation piece, right? So that is that was certainly a unique challenge.
I mean, I love that. I'm fascinated by like interactive storytelling, but also the logistics for making that work. I can't imagine like making and rendering like 20 different variations of the same scene that all have to hook up to like different versions of the previous scene where like maybe the character's missing an arm or something, or not, and you have to make that work.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, not so technically challenging, but idle animations as well, right? Someone who's been in like a video game industry might understand, but when the user has to make those choices, you have to give the user time to make those choices. So what is happening on screen, right? So you need to keep the action or the scene moving, but you have to give time for the viewer to answer. So those were kind of very unique things thrown at us as well.
Yeah. Tori, from your point of view, what makes working at Jam-Filled Entertainment different from other studios that you've worked at?
I worked at many studios that were kind of top-down leadership. And what I loved was really different for me, and it took a while to get used to. I hadn't been exposed to it, and I really loved it about Jam-Filled was there was a lot of trust given to the senior team. I felt like they really took their time and hired slowly in that senior team or promoted slowly or whatever it may be. And therefore, there was a lot of trust given to them. And there was not a lot of micromanaging on that team. And they wanted in client meetings, in the past, maybe it would be just a couple business people in a meeting. And at Jam-Filled, they would always bring the full creative team. And people weren't scripted or anything. It was really they really wanted the creative people that would be leading the project at Jam-Filled to really be open and form that relationship with the clients and the creative people on the executive side. So it was really refreshing and really different, but I saw the benefit in that the creative team at Jam-Filled cared so much that it really, I think, it shows in the quality that we do. So yeah, I would keep looking over my shoulder like, does someone want to reread this email? Like, are we good? Like, so there was a lot of trust put in, but once I recognized that, I realized the strength that it had. And there was so many people that cared about their respective areas, and the team that when everyone comes together, it really makes for a great product.
That's amazing. Really awesome to hear. Mike, from your point of view, what makes working at Jam-Filled different from other studios that you worked at?
I think I could echo a lot of what Tori just said. I haven't worked at a lot of studios. Again, like Jam-Filled is really only the second studio I've worked at. And I have not had a negative experience in any way. But I did recognize that it felt different in the sense that, as Tori mentioned before, the studio was created by creatives who wanted a studio that felt different. Like it embraced creativity, it embraced the artist, it supported the artist properly in ways that they had experienced potentially negative situations. So when I kind of came in, and I knew this and why I wanted to come here was just that, like, it was so creatively driven. Like Tori just said, there was so much trust put into the creative leads, and everybody just fed off each other. Every one of us cared about the product, more than the next person, and we tried to care about it more than the creator. And I think those things are all ingredients for an amazing studio, but also just successful relationships with clients, right? Every one of us is layering on, improvement and it's easy to say this, right? Yeah, everybody should improve the product. Yeah, of course, but that doesn't always happen. I do feel like it does here. And it's hard, it's extra work. You have to be critical, but we're all doing it towards the goal of our next project, right? Like, what is the future of Jam-Filled look like, and how do we better support that now? And it's by maintaining those client relationships. So really caring about the product. If you don't, then it kind of just feels like a 9 to 5, and it's good enough mentality, and I'll go home, and if we deliver or not, it doesn't really matter. But it always does to us And I find that's, it's such a good thing to come into every day, because you're working with people that care so much. It elevates you as well, right? If nobody cared, then I don't really have to try hard either. But because everybody does so much, I need to bring my A game in every conversation I have. And I hope that helps inspire other people when I talk to them. So I don't know if that's different, but it certainly feels good being here and knowing that that's the way we work.
Yeah. Sam, from your point of view, what makes working at Jamfield Entertainment different from other animation studios you've worked at?
I was going to make a joke about how we have so many more hands in our builds. I don't have to draw them. But I feel like I make that joke because it's true. I also haven't worked at a ton of places. And the first place I work, I'm going somewhere with this. The first place I worked, they didn't have a lot of hands. And it did feel just like kind of on fire all the time. And not that we don't have our own challenges here at Jamfield, and not that things don't get on fire, but it all felt very much more, I don't know if professional is the right word when I came over, but structured. And there's always been, like the leadership and the people that you can go to that are helping you get better. Like, it definitely felt like a place that I could build a career instead of just, power animating till the wee hours of the night, because we have to get something out the door. And like Mike said, it can't just be good enough. So it definitely felt like a place where I've always felt like I personally am improving my own skills by being here. And I just don't know, not to say that I wouldn't feel that anywhere else, because I can't speak into anywhere else, but I don't think it would be the same. And I don't think you would be pushed the same way. And I also think, to the senior team and all that, I think as for being a place that you want to work, they shield a lot of the fires from you too. Like the directors and the supervisors have always been really good at having their own stresses, but not necessarily letting that seep down. And I feel like other studios, it's everyone's problem. Everything is everyone's problem all of the time, and that can be hard on morale and stuff. But I haven't found that here. So it just feels like a really pleasant, inspiring place to be.
That's really cool. Sam, for artists to work at Jamfield, for artists who are interested in working at Jamfield Entertainment, what advice would you give them? Drop
out of school. Kidding. Please tell me you've listened to this podcast from the beginning. You got to care and be passionate about what you're doing. Like we've said, it is a place to grow and learn and all that stuff, but you still need to put in the hours, and you still need to put in, you get back what you put in, whatever that saying is. If you don't love it, it'll be hard on you, and it is challenging. And we pick shows, like we've been saying this whole time, that are challenging, that push us. So you have to be prepared to be pushed in that same way when you're applying to come here.
Tori, for artists who want to work at Jamfield, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, sort of echo Sam. I think keep pushing yourself, because we're going to keep pushing ourselves. So we want to all be moving forward, and we're looking for people who want to grow as well. So, and I think Mike does a really good job, and Sam and everyone who's a part of recruiting is looking for people and evaluating based on not just where they're at now, but what their potential is. So we really care about someone's growth, because we as a studio want to continue to grow as well. So.
Yeah, and Mike, what advice would you have for artists who want to work at Jamfield?
Oh boy. Those are great answers. Yes, hard work. Do it. Go get, work hard. I don't know. The industry is highly competitive right now, right? It is a hard industry to be in. It's hard for students, because you're coming into a world where there's a sea of veterans out there who are also looking for work. It is extremely difficult. It's easier for me to see work from someone who has 10 years experience and know what I'm going to get, right? I'm going to speak, I'll speak from the recruiter side of things. I have to know what I'm going to get, right? So when I see the work, I have to know that I can fit that person into the production that matches their style, their mindsets, their passions, and it's going to work for the production. Right. So for people who have less than that, 10 years experience, or are coming out of school, something has to stand out. And it's that 10 to 20 seconds at the beginning of your reel that is going to show me whether you do or not. Like, a reel has to be more than just the scenes you've been assigned. I think that's the best advice I can give. Like if you're coming from another studio or you've been laid off and you're picking through all of the work you've done, the best shots in there describe all of the shots in there are telling me that they are the best shots you've done, right? And not just at that studio, but ever up until this point. So if, you know, the extra work is not, I worked hard on those scenes I was given. The extra work needs to be in creating something past that that is going to wow me, right? If your reel contains dialogue shots, sorry, we're getting like super real now. If your reel contains like a sequence of dialogue, I understand that that might be great for you, and maybe it was a really funny moment, and that's why it's in your reel, because you're hoping to make me laugh. But here's another little honest truth. I sometimes watch reels without music, right? I turn off the sound because the audio levels are all over the place. I don't really have the same interest in music. I want to see the animation. If there's actual scene audio, I'll listen. But if there's music over top, I just care about the visuals. So anyway, the dialogue means nothing, right? Those, if you're showing me those in a reel, then you're telling me that that dialogue scene is some of the best work you've done, right? And it might be, but the extra work has to be creating your own build, finding a free model, doing the action sequence that you want to be considered for and that is showcasing your abilities, right? You have to go beyond just what a supervisor had time to assign you. I think that's the biggest mistake I see in a lot of reels we get, is that it just feels like that. It's like, okay, well, that was your sequence and it looks great, but it's not as strong as this person who has clearly gone above and beyond. I don't know where they got it from, but they animated it really, really well. And that stands out more. The other thing is, I mean, we touched on this before, is knowing what you're applying for. If you're applying to Jamfield, we are a Harmony Toon Boom digital animation shop, right? If your reel is phenomenal and has a bunch of traditional work in it, that's great, but I don't know you can pick up a rig and translate that to our shows, right? I need to see a strong example of rig-based Harmony work, right? This is the stuff that's important to me as someone who looks at these things. You really have to cater your reel to what it is you're applying for, and don't feel like, just again, I'll harp on it again, don't feel like what you've been assigned is the best you can do, because I know you think you can do more. So build that character, learn how a build works, and then show me a scene. Even if it doesn't have a background, show me the animation. Show me the animation that you can do, and you're going to be instantly above a large portion of people that are still out there looking for work.
Yeah, I think one of the disconnects that can happen is that a lot of artists are told, well, you need to have a reel, so they make a reel. But maybe they make it without thinking about what the person at the studio who's going through those reels is looking for.
My advice is overthink about everything you do always. It won't make you go crazy at all. Yeah, what could go wrong?
It's like, honestly, the reel length doesn't matter. Like, those first 10 to 20 seconds, if you can show me really good rig-based animation, that's going to get your name at least to the next stage, right? Like, we'll have an interview. I might check your resume at that point, but like, you've got to wow at the beginning.
On that note, thank you, Tori, Mike, and Sam, for joining us for today's discussion about Jamfield Entertainment. Where can our audience follow you to learn more about the studio and also learn more about your own work?
Our website, jamfield.com, has all of our work and some reels and shorts that we've produced that are a great start to understand what it is we do, 2D and 3D. We have a pretty fun Instagram presence, I believe, that gives you a little bit more of a behind-the-scenes look at what we do and the little goofy things we get up to. Yeah, I mean, there's studio tours. If you're a student, we always welcome students coming in and learning what it is we do and what we're about whenever there's an opportunity. Yeah, I don't know. What else am I forgetting?
Yeah, Mike, is there anywhere people can go to follow your work? IMDb page or Instagram?
I wish there was, but no, there is not. I am focused on Jamfield work entirely, and I have no time to produce my own work.
Sam, where can people go to see more of your work?
I do have an Instagram. It's like half my dog and half drawings, and then sometimes pushing my own podcast, but people can find me there at Sam Animation. That's it. Really inspired. Animation.
And Tori, where can people go to find more of your work?
You really can't find anything online, I don't think. So my scheduling and budgeting work really lives within the hard drive of Jamfilled. But yeah, I think the best way to look at the studio work is everything Mike said, the Instagram and our website.
I also would say for people that are visiting Ottawa and stuff, like thinking about looking at other people's work and being inspired and stuff, there's an animation show and tell that they've just started doing every May 1st at the Mayfair Theatre, and all the locals just kind of do their own personal projects and show them and it's really cool. So I don't know.
Great.
I'm gonna push people to come do that.
The Mayfair Theatre is a Ottawa institution.
Yeah.
It's like one of the 2 independent repertoire theaters in the city. The Mayfair is the one that's downtown, right? It's the
it's on Bank Street.
Bytown
Bytown is downtown. Mayfair's
that's right.
in the middle. Yeah.
In Old Ottawa South. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, we really appreciate taking time to talk about your work as well as what it's like to work at Jamfilled. As your viewers may know, this discussion is being recorded on Halloween, and it would be really scary if I wasn't wearing an incredibly soft pullover Toon Boom hoodie. If you're looking for a holiday present for the Harmony or Storyboard Pro expert at your studio, you can order one at toonboom.com. Just press the menu button at the top and click Shop Merch. Next Tuesday on November 5th, Marie-Ève Lasselle will be hosting an art stream at 3 p.m. Eastern with guest artist David Leo. You might know David from his anime-style character, Space Maria, or his work on the cinematics for River City Girls Zero. They'll be discussing animation for games, and you won't want to miss it. So thank you all for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time. And I just saw that Shane Plant commented, "Yes, awesome plug, Sam." Shane's great.
Hi, Shane.